Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. Liverpool are back playing football again this Tuesday night as they face Hoffenheim in a Champions League playoff game to see who will make it to the group stage. And this is arguably, and certainly in my own personal opinion, one of the biggest games in the club's recent history, because it is as simple as win this, we get Champions League football, lose this and we get Europa League football. And in a season that is already threatening to go completely off the rails this early on after just one competitive game, Liverpool cannot afford to drop out into the Europa League group stages. I can't deal with the Europa League ever again. I don't ever want to go back there. I'm sure the players don't either, and I'm sure all Liverpool fans want to avoid the Europa League because it's not fun and it doesn't really help you in terms of your actual season, especially your Premier League campaign. And if Liverpool want to be a big club, which is what we are apparently trying to be doing, although the Watford game would have you think otherwise given how we performed in that game, we need Champions League football. We need to make it to the group stage and we need to make that kind of big statement. And given how the current transfer window seems to be going for Liverpool, how badly we performed against Watford and how it became clear in that game that we might actually need a few more summer acquisitions, and with Phil Coutinho's transfer saga still rumbling on, we're not quite sure whether or not he is going to be a Liverpool player by the end of the window. We may need to sign some more players between now and the 31st of August. And if we want them to be good players, players that are good enough to help us be a big club, we need to qualify for Champions League football. We need to get to the group stage, because if we don't, those players that we sign are probably going to be, Shane Long and Manuel Lanzini. And like the Europa League, that is not something I want us to be doing. So make no bones about it, this is a must-win game for Liverpool. And the big worry for me is that I can't necessarily see Liverpool winning this game, especially given how we performed against Watford, and the fact that, given that this is a midweek match and we do play Crystal Palace on the Saturday after this game as well, in an ideal world, we'd be making quite a few changes for this game. We'd be able to call on some squad depth, bring in some other players who are on the bench against Watford to swap things out, get some players rested, ready for the game against Palace without actually affecting the team. But given the injuries that we've already had in pre-season and our slightly questionable summer transfer window activity, I don't think Liverpool can take a single player out of the team that played against Watford without it being to the detriment of the overall team and making the team less good, making it worse than it was against Watford. And this is the big worry for me, because especially given how poorly we performed against Watford, if I were Jurgen Klopp, I'd want to be making changes. I'd want to be switching things up to try and rectify the issues that presented themselves against Watford. But with the lack of squad depth that we have at the moment, with the lack of players who are available to come into that starting 11, it's going to be quite difficult for us to do that. However, there is one way that I think Liverpool could potentially rectify a couple of the problems that surfaced in the game against Watford. And this is to make a slight tweak to the formation that we played. I think if Liverpool switched from a 4-3-3 to a 4-2-3-1, they could rectify a couple of those problems, because one of the main problems in that game that I highlighted in the post-match video, if you haven't seen that already, then do check it out. It's quite sad, quite angry, quite annoyed, because obviously I think that's how we all felt after the Watford game. But the key problem that I pointed out was that the midfield simply wasn't doing enough to help out the attack. There was a big gap between the midfield and the attack, and it meant that the front three basically had to fend for themselves and create all the chances themselves, which they did fairly well. We managed to score 3 goals despite the issues that occurred with our attacking play, but I would quite like to see the midfield do a little bit more to help out. And I think if we play a 4-2-3-1, where we have one of those midfielders in a more number 10 role, where their basic role is to simply help out the attack and act as part of a front 4 instead of having a front 3 and a midfield 3, then I think it could help this issue. And also, by having a midfield 2 who are a bit more withdrawn because of the existence of that front 4, we could also rectify the problems that occurred in the Watford game, where the midfield and the defence were also too far apart. The midfield simply didn't help out the defence enough, and it meant that the defence was put under a lot of pressure and led to a lot of mistakes, which also led to conceding 3 horrible goals. So I think 4-2-3-1 could help to solve our problems. I'm not saying a rigid 4-2-3-1, because I think the wingers should still push higher up the pitch, but the main idea is to take one of those midfielders and put them in a more number 10 role, where they're meant to be more creative and more attacking. And the 2 players that I think can play this role are either Georginio Wijnaldum. I don't think he was good against Watford. I think he was our worst player. So it would potentially be a gamble from Jurgen Klopp to put him in such a pivotal role and try and get him to play such a pivotal role in the whole team, where normally we'd have someone as good as Felipe Coutinho playing the kind of number 10 position. But Wijnaldum played that number 10 attacking role at times for Newcastle. He played it before he arrived in England for most of his career. It's only when he arrived at Liverpool that he became more of a number 8 kind of engine room midfielder. So he's no stranger to that role, and he could necessarily do a job there. It's just a matter of whether or not Jurgen Klopp trusts him, given his poor performance in the game against Watford. Another option that could also occur is that Jurgen Klopp could drop Bobby Firmino back into that number 10 role, because again, Firmino, before he arrived at Liverpool, that was basically what he was known for. He arrived as an attacking midfielder. That's basically the role he played against Hoffenheim, and he did still get a few goals and quite a few more assists in that position as well. So it wouldn't necessarily be detriment to his overall play if he was withdrawn into the number 10 role, and it still means that he can link up with Mane and Salah if they're part of an overall front four. And then obviously you'd need someone else in the striking position. Ideally for me, that would be Dom Solanke, because he impressed a lot in pre-season, and I think while he is the young and supposedly inexperienced, I think he wouldn't necessarily be fazed by playing in a Champions League playoff game against Hoffenheim, because as he showed in pre-season, he's capable of doing it on the fairly big stages despite his relative youth and apparent inexperience. However, given that Jurgen Klopp brought on Divock Origi rather than Dom Solanke for the game against Watford, and given the fact that I don't think he necessarily would want to throw Dom Solanke in at the supposed deep end of a Champions League playoff, I think it's more likely that if he did go for this system, he'd probably play Divock Origi in that role rather than putting in Dom Solanke at this point, because I think he wants to protect Dom Solanke. He's a potential big one for the future. He could have a big future at the club, and he doesn't want to impact his development too much. But I think something does need to change with our team. For me, ideally, it would be that 4-2-3-1 system change, but I think we have to see, really. I'm not really optimistic because of how badly we performed against Watford and how little room there is for manoeuvre in terms of what Jurgen Klopp can do to shake up the squad at the moment, given injuries and a lack of squad depth. So taking a look at the opposition then, Hoffenheim, who have yet to play this season. This will actually be their first competitive match because the Bundesliga doesn't actually get underway until next weekend. So this will be their first match, and going off of what they were like last season, there is one stat that stands out and has come to fruition apparently today. All of the Liverpool Echo were reporting it, and it is a big concern for Liverpool because basically Hoffenheim scored 64 league goals last season, and 16 of those goals were from set pieces. And who is bad at defending set pieces? Liverpool. Liverpool are bad at defending set pieces. That is 25% of Hoffenheim's goals that have come from set pieces. And as anyone who watched the Liverpool game against Watford will know, that is a very big concern for our defence at the moment. And the problem with set pieces as well is it has been an ongoing problem for Liverpool. It's something that doesn't look like it's going to get fixed anytime soon. And with a couple of days between the Watford and Hoffenheim game, I can't see us rectifying any of the issues in time for this game against Hoffenheim. So that is a huge worry for us, and another huge test that I'm not sure that the team can actually pass. That being said, Hoffenheim, like Liverpool, haven't actually had a particularly brilliant summer transfer window. They've sold a lot of their best players. They've sold Nicolas Saul, the centre-back, who I think a lot of Liverpool fans would have quite liked to see us come to our club. They sold him to Bayern Munich. They also sold their defensive midfielder, Sebastian Rudy, to Bayern Munich. So they've sold a lot of their best players during this summer and haven't actually recruited that well. I mean, their most notable acquisition is Havard Nordveit from West Ham, who anyone who watched him play for West Ham last season will know that he's not that good, really. So that is a bonus for Liverpool, the fact that they haven't necessarily recruited well, and hopefully, despite the fact that they were very good in the Bundesliga last season, we can kind of hope that their performance levels will have dropped ever so slightly, and maybe they won't be as good from set-piece situations as they were last season. Fingers crossed on that one, because if they are, then Liverpool could be in for a very rough ride in this game. So despite the fact that I don't think we are going to do very well in this game, I'm very, very worried for how this could turn out. I'm going to try and conjure up some optimism and try and think of 3 reasons why we could beat Hoffenheim, and I have just about managed it. And the first reason is that Liverpool are a big game team. No matter how badly we've been doing at any point under Jurgen Klopp's reign, we always seem to be able to summon it up when playing against the big teams. And with this being a Champions League playoff, it's a European night, and it's also against Hoffenheim, who finished 4th in the Bundesliga last season, which is no mean feat given that the Bundesliga is quite a strong league at the moment. This is a big game for Liverpool, and hopefully, given that, you know, even when we were absolutely terrible during winter last season, we were awful during February, and then suddenly Spurs came to Anfield, beat them 2-0. We were awful after that, and then Arsenal came to Anfield and we beat them 3-1. So hopefully, despite the fact that Liverpool are doing badly, they can still summon up those big game performances that they always seem capable of putting in, and be able to actually at least either win this game or at least put in a decent performance that means that we're not too damaged when we come to Anfield for the second leg. Add to that the fact that hopefully Hoffenheim will play a high defensive line, means that we will hopefully be able to get in behind, especially with players like Mane and Salah and Firmino, who benefit an awful lot from those kind of situations. And Liverpool may actually do a little bit better than this game than maybe a lot of people think they will do. Speaking of getting in behind the defence, I think the key players for Liverpool in this game are going to be Sadio Mane and Mohamed Salah, because even when the attack was performing so poorly in the game against Watford, both of them still managed to get goals from open play, and both of them still managed to put in fairly decent performances, and they were both capable of conjuring up something from nothing effectively. They'd get the ball in fairly non-threatening positions, and they'd still be able to create chances, despite the fact that the rest of the team wasn't really helping them. Firmino was quite helpful as well, but I think a lot of it was down to Mane and Salah putting in the hard work to try and conjure something up for Liverpool, and especially given that one of Hoffenheim's apparent weaknesses is attacks down the wings, and one of Liverpool's biggest strengths with Mane and Salah in the side is attacking down those wings. We could potentially see quite a few goals from Liverpool, provided those two wingers are on the top of their game. So, provided they start as well, because obviously they only just finished playing against Watford, and Jurgen Klopp might have to rest some of them, given that they're fast, athletic kind of players, and they will need a rest at some point. They will hopefully play. I'm really crossing my fingers for it, because like I said, we can't really take any players out of the team without affecting it quite badly, and Mane and Salah are the most irreplaceable out of that entire starting 11. We need them in this game, and even if it means not playing them against Palace, I think we should just play them and hope for the best. And finally, these players need to put in a big performance, because if they don't, then there is a big risk, especially after the bad game against Watford, that they could lose their place, because the transfer window is not yet closed. And with Liverpool's squad depth looking very light, I would be surprised if the players don't perform well in this game against Hoffenheim either. Then Jurgen Klopp doesn't start considering maybe getting a plan B, moving on from the transfer targets he tried to get but didn't quite manage to get those deals over the line, and just bringing in players to at least challenge the current first team players for those starting positions. So if these players don't put in those big performances that they need to start putting in after starting the season so poorly, then they will start looking over their shoulders, not just at potential new signings, but at the players on the bench as well. Because while those players on the bench, they're not necessarily that experienced, Jurgen Klopp may still want to bring them in simply to give a feeling of competition amongst those first team players, to try and challenge them to play a little bit better. So it is as simple as that, really. If they don't perform in this game, then their place in that starting 11 is at risk. So hopefully that should motivate the players, should motivate them to put in that big game performance that we know they all have in them, and should hopefully lead to us just playing better than we did in that awful match against Watford. So that is all for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. If you do want to know how I think the team will actually line up starting 11 wise in the game against Hoffenheim, then do check out the FIFA 17 predictor. That'll either be out tonight or at some point tomorrow. If it's already out, the link will be there. If not, then something else will be. Apart from that, don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're new around here. Check out the other video that's down there as well. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter as well, and I'll see you in a bit. Bye for now.